If you enjoy working on home improvement projects and you feel like you're ready to tackle installing a ceramic tile floor, well, then follow along in this video as we continue the process of doing that in this basement room. I have gone out and selected some tile, brought it home, and done preparation work on the floor to get it ready for tiling. And in this video, we're going to go ahead, we're going to lay out the floor, show you how to do that properly, talk about some gotchas and things to watch for when you're laying out a tile floor. Come along and let's get started. I've done quite a bit of tile work over the years in homes we've owned and in rental property. And the key to getting it done is getting off to a good start with a good prepared area and then getting good measurements and getting it laid out so the tile comes out the right width on all ends, because if you don't lay it out right, you can end up with a narrow strip of tile on one end and a wide strip of tile on the other. And on the sides have the same thing happen. I am going to get some dimensions and find the center of this wall, and we're going to get it marked, and then we'll do the center of the wall on the other end, and then proceed to get the centers from end to end. As I go along this fireplace, I have a dimension of 166.5 inches. 166.5 with simple math divided by 2 comes out to 83.25 inches for the halfway point. So we will mark from this wall over here 83.25 inches, and that will be the mark for a chalk line on this end. Getting the center point between these two walls on this end of the room is going to be just a little bit trickier because of the way the room is laid out. So I'm going to start right here between the walls, right here by the doorway. So let's just see what we have here for a dimension. We had 166.5 inches on the other end. Let's see what we come up with here. This ends up to be pretty close to it. And for what we're doing, it's close enough. So half of that is 83.25 inches. So let's get that 83.25 inch mark put down here on the floor. And we will come back and put a chalk line down there later once we get the other dimensions. Here's where it starts to get a little more interesting. If I was just doing a perfectly rectangular room and just putting a tile in that room, I would get the center point from end to end, mark that, we'd calculate how to divide up the tile, and we could get started. But I've got this wall that's further back than that wall. And if I do the dimensions for this wall only and make it come out, I may not come out right at all in this wall. So I've got to take that into account. We have to start with getting at least the center line from here to here before we can start playing with that and see how we end up here. Now here comes the next complication. I'm not just putting tile in this room, but I'm going to be tiling the room next to it, the exercise and sewing room area. I have to go into that room and do the same process, find out where the centers would be wall to wall in here. So if I was doing this other room by itself, I could make everything come out this way pretty easily, but I've got to make sure that I come out with those dimensions that make it meet here in this doorway and come out properly so the grout lines line up with both sets of tile. I certainly want all of those lines to come out. So I'm going to have to get the dimensions over here, even though I'm going to be doing this room after this one is complete. And then figure out where I'm going to hit in here to line up. That sound easy enough? I guess so, except there's another dimension. This room over here is a much longer room, and it extends into the landing area at the base of the stairs that's going to be tiled with the same tile and wrap around into a hallway on the other side of the stairs that go in front of a bathroom and a bedroom on that side. So I need to lay the tile out in here and in here so everything balances, so I don't end up with a little tiny strip of tile over by the bathroom and a big wide strip of tile next to the stairwell in the hallway. So I've got a lot of figuring to do. I've got to do a lot of measuring, and then we'll start laying things out and see what we can do to get this to come out. Another thing you need to be aware of when you're laying this all out is what the width of the tiles will be with the grout spacing. Now these tiles are called 12-inch tiles, but they are actually 11 13/16 wide. And with a floor like this on a 1 foot square tile, 12-inch tile, I always use a 3/16 tile spacer to lay them out to maintain the grout line. So with those spacers in place, if you add 3/16 to 13/16, well, you get an inch. So now I am 12 inches from the edge of this tile to the outer edge of the next tile, and it just keeps repeating itself. That's where I get the 12 inches. So when you're laying things out and seeing how much you're going to need to fill an area, you have to bear that in mind. You have to take the grout spacing into account while you're doing this. Let's just take a moment for those of you that have a simple rectangular room to do and talk about the easy way to calculate what you're going to need for tile. And I've done some real quick calculations. If you take the total distance in inches across the floor and you divide that by 12 inches for each tile, in this particular case, the distance end to end of 203 inches, I divide that by 12 and I get 16.92 tiles. Well, that's not quite a full tile on the last tile you put in next to that wall. So now you have to make a decision. What do you want to do? Do you want to cut just a little bit off of that one tile because 16.92 comes to 16 tiles plus 11 inches on another tile? Or do you want to do what I would normally do, and you take that last tile, since it's less than a full tile, you cut it, and each one on the end would be just slightly under half a tile, and that would balance the appearance of the floor from end to end. And when I'm talking about the side, I've got side-to-side measurement. I've got 166.5 inches. Divide that by 12 inches, and that comes out to 13.92 tiles, just a hair under 14 tiles. Well, I got the same consideration to make here, so what I would do is I would put the 13 tiles across the floor and then on each end, just slightly under half a tile. And that would give me a nice balanced layout with just a half a tile roughly on each side and each end of the room. And that's pretty much the easy calculation you have to do when you are doing a straight rectangular room. This is going to vary based on what you have left over on the end. But if you have anything less than one full tile on the end, you've got to make that decision. How do you want to divide that up? In the next part of this video, we're going to get into the little more complicated decision on how to lay this out so it meshes with the other room and with the irregularities in this room. To continue the layout and see how the tile all fits, I'm going to snap a chalk line here. And I've got my wife holding the line on the other end, holding it down on the mark there, and I've got the line across the mark up on this end. I'm going to pull it as snug as I can and snap the line, and I now have a mark across, and we're going to do the same thing from side to side, and then I can start laying the tile out. Now I drop both chalk lines in here, dividing the room up into roughly quarters, and taking the center there, I use the old 3, 4, 5 rule to make sure that I'm square, because you want these lines, these quarters, to be square. So from that center point there, I measured out 3 feet over here, I measured 4 feet over there, ran a tape measure, and I come out to exactly 5 feet. That's the 3, 4, 5 rule. I know that I have square marks here on the floor, so I'm going to start laying tile out old school by knowing that I need about a half a tile on each side and on each end. I'm going to start setting the tile centered down these chalk lines and work it towards the door and see how everything lines up. Using the lines on the floor, I have done a test layout of the tile to see how it works out, both the long way and across the room. And it's just something to note, because going end to end on the room meant there would be roughly 17 tiles. If I was splitting that in two, obviously I would have to lay it over the chalk line, split that in half because it's an odd number. But because I have to cut a tile at the end, roughly a half a tile. That means now I start my tile right on the line to come out right on the end. It's just the opposite over here, wall to wall. The total came to an even number, 14. If you divide that by 2, you get 7. You'd think you would lay 7 tiles in starting right at the line on each side, but because again I have to cut a tile because I can't fit quite a whole tile on each end. In this case, I'm laying the tile side to side, splitting it in the middle on the chalk line. I don't know if you can see that right there. So there's the math. Normally, you would just divide the number by 2, even number, you'd have the same number on either side of the line, or an odd number, you'd split it. This was flipped because I have to use short tiles on the ends. Now here's how I come out on the tile on the end on the long way. There's the piece I expected, just under half a tile, probably about 4.5 inches. I'll have to cut that. But when I get over here on this wall that is a kick-out wall, you can see that I'm going to end up with a roughly 3.5 inch tile here. I can live with that because it's just a short little section of wall, and to make any adjustment to widen that would throw everything off over here, and it's really the main area of the room that I want to look balanced. And if I move it the other way, of course, I've got just a sliver, and that would look even worse. That's going to be the layout in this room. I will adjust chalk lines so that I have a starting point on this back end to start laying tile. And then I'll have to set up a row and cut along that end. Unfortunately, on this end, it looks like because the tile won't quite slide underneath the base mold here, I'm probably going to have to pull that base mold so I can get the tile up close enough to the wall and then reinstall that base mold. This one over here looks like it's high enough and I won't have to pull it. I can get the tile, even with the thin set on there, slid underneath. Then came the problem of getting everything to line up with the other room. So let's go into how I did that and the adjustments I had to make in here to make everything come out and yet visually look good. I found the center of this room, dropped the chalk line to find out my tile count from wall to wall over this way, and then I extended the line of tiles from the other room coming this way out into here up to the chalk line where it would end at the halfway point going across the room. From there, I got a measurement from this tile to that other wall and divided it up, and it came up to about 16.5 tiles. Perfect. I'd have a half tile on that end. Since this is a short area to work, I then laid tiles out across here, up to this door, along the side of this hall, and then started laying some tile this way to see how they come out inside the hallway. And that's where I had to start making my adjustments to make a balance, to make sure everything came out with the stairwell and this hallway. Well, as that turned out, I have almost a perfect full tile width from this row of tile to the bottom of the stairs. I grout that in, put a little strip along here, that's going to be perfect. No cutting, no short piece in there, that looks great. So now it's just a matter of adjusting everything side to side to make it align with the walls and the stairwell. It's when I got to the hallway that I had to start making an adjustment. I had quite a bit of imbalance here. This distance much shorter than this distance. So I looked to see if I divided that up and made it even, moving that way, how much difference it would make in that other main row of tiles. And to get it even would have made too much of a difference, but if I moved it just a little bit, 3/4 of an inch, I would get much closer in a matching width here and still keep a nice tile width at both doors. So that's what I did. I went with that 3/4 of an inch because the other thing it did for me, if I get over here, is I had an imbalance in front of the stairs. And I would have ended up with a full tile plus a little tiny bit over here and something short of a full tile here, which is fine. I could have cut that. Well, I didn't want that, so with that 3/4 of an inch, I'm able to put a complete full tile next to this one and about a 10-inch tile here, but that'll extend out into this area, and that'll make a really nice balance, and it'll be even across here. So that'll look pretty good. So I had to translate that 3/4 of an inch over to the run in the other room and move everything down just a little bit to make it come out. Let's see what that did. Very first thing it did worked out just great. That 3/4 of an inch balanced out the tile coming into the doorway. So I have an even width here, and it's just about a full tile. I'll have to cut a little bit off of each end, not much, and it'll go underneath this baseboard. So this will be nice and balanced coming through the doorway. So that's one benefit I got. And I only had to move the row of tiles. I haven't moved it yet, but it'll only be 3/4 of an inch this way. So instead of the roughly 5 3/4 gap that I started out with, I will have a roughly 6 1/4 inch gap over here. Barely noticeable. And it gives me another benefit as I go over to this side. I was very tight over here with about 3 1/2 inches, and now I'm about 4 1/2, 4 1/4, 4 1/2 inches from the wall here. It gives me a little bit wider strip. That's going to look better visually coming into this room. So that's a benefit. Now, of course, on the other end, I had to take 3/4 of an inch away, move the tile a little bit closer to the fireplace. But the fireplace, because of the brick stack there, that little bit narrower strip is going to blend in just fine visually because of the bricks laid out the way they are. So everything's going to work out. So I think I have a good balance here. I'm going to take it from this point and get new chalk lines dropped, laid out, so I can start the tiling process down on that end by the fireplace. And that's what we're going to do in the next video. I'll have the chalk lines down and we'll get going on getting that tile laid. If you've enjoyed this video, please click like and consider subscribing to our channel. I enjoy making these. I do the work anyway, so if I have an opportunity to share it with you so you can learn something, that's something valuable to me. So again, thanks for watching, and tune in next time as we start laying this tile. So until then, enjoy your projects and take care.